Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. Today I'm standing on the corner of Underwood Street and Daly Street here in the city, down near Circular Quay, in the presence of this wonderful art installation known as the Underwood Ark. So what it appears to be and what it actually is a tree. But before I talk to you about this tree, what I want to first do is talk about this precinct, this area here, and put it into perspective from a historical point of view. Next to Underwood Lane is the Telstra Exchange, this building here, and next to that building is the substation, the zone substation for the area. And this is the site of the first commercial shipbuilding yard back in the days of early settlement. And the proprietor of the shipbuilding yard was a fellow by the name of James Underwood, hence the name Underwood Street. So this area here was the place where they built ships, they maintained ships, and they put ships into the water. We're close to the harbour here, but in the early days, the harbour foreshore was much closer than what it is today. And this whole area here was characterised by trees like this one here, which is a black butt gum tree. And these trees, of course, would have been felled to build ships, to maintain ships, to build houses, and to make room for settlement. So where does it take us? What can we make of this? So back in 2017, there was a competition put forward to see whether or not some artwork could be created in order to celebrate this particular area in the city. So as we said, this area here would have been abundant in these magnificent, glorious black butt trees. And of course today there are none to be seen because the area here is now surrounded in magnificent tall buildings, and it only makes sense to be contrasted with this horizontal magnificent tree. So a little bit more about this tree here. So this tree here was sourced down south in near Bega, near the Shoalhaven, and it's a tree which is well over 200 years old. You could say that when Captain Cook and when Captain Arthur Phillip arrived in 1788, this tree would have been either a seed or a seedling. So it represents our modern history to a great extent. So what we have here is a tree which is 100 foot tall, 35 metres long, and the artist needed to find a tree which was long enough, straight enough, with a consistent diameter to be able to be suspended, and with the characteristics that would make it unique. One of the beauties of this tree here is that it is as straight as an arrow and it is undivided. It's very important to understand that this tree is undivided, and yet we live in a community, in a society that wishes to divide us. So this tree has a couple of interpretations. The artistic interpretation is that this tree here represents what white settlement has done to the environment and to the ecology of the area, and how it displaced the indigenous people, of which there were 29 clans of people that inhabited this area. And they say that there was between 4,000 and 8,000 people of the Aurora Nation that were in this area. So artistic expression and artistic interpretation is up to each person's subjectivity. And I, for example, see this tree a little bit differently to what the artist sees it. I see this tree as the expression of what the Australian nation really is. And what I'll do is I'll try and describe it as best I can in a limited amount of time that I've got available. So the tree, as I said, was identified and felled down in the Shoalhaven region. The original tree that they first identified got damaged in the felling process, so this is the second to pick. But when you look closely at this tree, you'll notice a root ball. This root ball weighs about 8 tons, and it is a very complex root ball. And what it symbolises, or what it can symbolise to those who have eyes to see, is the fact that the Australian nation is built on people who came from every nation in the world. Let's make an important point, and that point is that there is nobody, or has been nobody, in Australia who wasn't born here or didn't travel here from another place. This whole notion of always has been, always will be, is a little bit fanciful, because everybody, including the indigenous people, came here from somewhere else. So this tree here, this root ball, shows that people have travelled from the 5 continents in the world, or island nations, to call Australia home. I can see the roots of my forefathers who came from Greece. You may see the roots of your forefathers and foremothers who came from somewhere else. But this country is an expression of multiculturalism. It is one of the greatest multicultural success stories that the world has ever seen. So back in 1770, Captain Cook came to this land and identified Sydney Cove in this particular area. And 18 years later, in 1788, Captain Arthur Phillip came with the first fleet, of which there were 11 ships with convicts. And in those early years, about 160,000 convicts came to Australia from England. And then there was another wave of settlement in terms of free people. There were about 200,000 people who came in the same period as which the convicts were coming to this land. And to put into perspective, there were about 500,000 Indigenous people in Australia in total. But Australia has seen wave after wave of migration, and as we said, that root ball shows in great detail, in great artistic detail, where everybody has come from. It represents the struggle, it represents the collaboration, the cooperation, the hard work that we've all done, we've all put in to create a nation, a multicultural nation, a successful, a world-class multicultural nation that is admired all over the world. So this tree to me shows the struggle, it shows where we've come from, it shows the toil. And as we said, everybody who has ever walked this country has either been born here or has come from somewhere else. And it doesn't matter if you've been here 60,000 years or 60,000 nanoseconds. We are all Australians. So the other thing I want to talk about in terms of this tree here is that, as you can see, it was cut up and installed in 4 separate pieces. And there are a couple of, or 3 different bridges. And I guess those bridges show some of the hidden stories in terms of our past, things that we may be ashamed of, things that we don't want to talk about, things that not everybody knows. But what it shows here is the trunk of progress, that straight, dramatic, powerful trunk of progress that has been created by all of our hard work, all of our contribution over time. And if we go along, we'll find that there are 2 tree branches that are about 2/3 of the way up the tree. And from my perspective, these tree branches, these 2 powerful images, represent the defining moment in Australia's history that unified, united, and characterised who we are as a country in terms of World War I and World War II, where we fought as one against the enemies of democracy, and we fought to protect our country, to protect our families, and to protect all that is Australia. And then following World War I and World War II, we had Vietnam War and we had other wars which weren't quite as I guess successful in terms of characterising us as a country. So hence they are hidden in that box up there. And when we go to the other end of the tree, what we'll find is we'll find the branches, and there are 14 branches there. And those branches, from my perspective, represent everything about Australia, which is great. Our natural resources, our mineral resources, our agricultural resources, our energy resources, the greatness that we have in sport, in the arts, in film, in science, in medicine, in education. There are a whole stack of things, there are a whole stack of industries that are represented through those branches in terms of our hard work and our excellence. You know, there are areas that we are leaders in the world. So let's just talk a little bit more in terms of the migration waves. And as we said before, there were convicts which came to this country. There were the British who came from this country. There were Germans who were displaced in their own country. Lutherans who left Germany to come to Australia to get away from the Christian persecutions. There were other waves of migration as well. The Chinese, and at one point the Chinese were the 3rd biggest population of immigrants to Australia. First were the British, second were the Germans, then the Chinese, who came to find their wealth, find their future in terms of the gold rush and many other things. There were South Pacific Islanders who came to Australia to work on the plantations, the sugarcane plantations. There was a wave of Irish who came to Australia back in the day where they had the blight, the potato issue, which caused a quarter of their population to perish. So as you can see, there are many examples. There are people who have come on boats. There are refugees. There are asylum seekers. There are people like my parents who fled their country after World War II, where their country was devastated. So they were economic immigrants who came for a new life. So most of the people who came to Australia came for a specific reason. They were displaced from their homeland. They had to leave their parents. There are people who had to leave Lebanon, who had to leave Cyprus in the mid-70s. There are people who have had to leave other countries. We've got currently people leaving the Ukraine to come and live in Australia. People who, through no choice of their own, have had to leave, have been forced to leave in order to find freedom and to find a life for their family, to find a place which is safe. So this tree represents many things to many people, and I've just given you an example of what it means to me. So thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. Please make a point to come down and see this magnificent tree. As I said, it's 200 years old. It's a magnificent work of art. It's suspended 10 metres above the road, and it is absolutely grand. So take a point, take a time, come down, check it out, and I look forward to talking a few more things. Yas, take care, and bye for now.